Good morning, everyone. I'm Pam Groswell with the Harwich Voter Information Committee. This morning, we are going to have a panel discussion on the financial state of Harwich going into our upcoming town meeting this May, which is right around the corner. So
12 days away, but who's
12
counting,
days,
right?
right?
Yeah.
So at the table with me today, we have Tina Games. Tina is the representative from the Monomoy School System. John Shorey, who is the chair of the Finance Committee. Joe Powers, who seems to be on a panel every night lately, who is our town administrator, and Carol Coppola, who is also on 100 panel discussions at this point. So I thank you all for coming. I know we've had lots of discussions before, but this is generally the financial piece that will help us understand what position we are in going into the town meeting. So I would like to start off with a very general question, and Joe, I'm going to put you up first, and then we'll do Carol and John and Tina. So I'd like to know, what is the difference in actual dollars between last year's spending allowance for town meeting and this upcoming year?
So first of all, Pam, good morning, and thanks for having me. And thank you to the Voter Information Committee. As I was saying in an earlier panel discussion, I love these opportunities because it means we're getting closer to town meeting, which is always a good thing. I also want to put the caveat out there that whenever I recite numbers, I will always look in the direction of the finance director if she has to correct me. But I believe, to answer the question, the delta between fiscal year 22 and 23 is $3,761,482 year over year. And Carol, did I get that right? There we go. Yep. So
Okay.
3.7 million and change.
All right, okay. That sounds like a lot of money, but a lot of it, by the time you factor in salaries and wages,
Right,
that gets chopped down pretty quickly.
right.
Yeah. Is there anything that stands out as being a big new expenditure this year?
So speaking for myself, what we have in fiscal year 23 is $750,000 that relates to wage adjustments. Now, I want to be very clear, that is in relation to our ongoing collective bargaining efforts with the 8 collective bargaining associations, or the 8 unions. But that's a placeholder number, for lack of a better phrase, so that we have money that we can rely upon if we're able to expedite our negotiating process. So the $750,000 does not equate to any current offer. It does not equate to any one collective bargaining association, but rather it was a prudent effort, I think, by the Board of Selectmen to set aside money because we're in that effort. And so we hope to rely upon that money in fiscal year 23 for as many, if not all, of the collective bargaining agreements that are currently under negotiations right now. And so that would get to some wage increases. It might get into some language changes that cost money. So that's a big item that sits out there, if you will. The other ones I think are a little bit more standard and we've seen in years before.
Okay. Now, does that include the school system, or is that separate?
No, the $750,000 for wage adjustments is only on the town side and only for the 8 collective bargaining associations plus our personnel bylaw employees. It's got nothing to do with either of the school districts.
Okay. Tina, can you tell us what your budget for negotiations is this year?
Yeah, for the for the school district's budget, and this is the overall budget, it's 42.8 million. So that is a 2.98 budget increase, but then you have to factor in Harwich's assessment, of which I can pull up here, unless Carol might have it handy over there. And so, and it's also important to note, if you don't mind me just taking this moment to just say this. So that assessment, hopefully Carol will give me the number real quickly, or I might have it here handy. But we also have a regional agreement amendment on the docket, so it might change. So depending on how you look at it, the current assessment and the budget that we talked about is going to increase 2.5% over last year if the regional agreement changes don't pass. If it does pass, we're looking at a 0.22 increase. So Carol, I think you might have the.
So the assessment for Harwich, for Monomoy is, for FY '23, is $28,041,205, which does represent 2.5% increase.
Okay. The question that we were on at first is the contract negotiations. Are you negotiating contracts at this point?
Actually, no, we are completely done with our
good.
negotiations.
Good.
Yeah, we're all caught up.
Well, that's
Yeah,
nice.
so there's nothing new that will be, yes.
Because
Yeah.
that tends to be the biggest
No,
piece
no,
in
we're all-
any budget is.
Yeah, we're all settled on all of our units.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah.
So we have a good amount of money here to spend. The questions now will get into how are we spending that money? And I'd like to know, first off, what does this mean? If everything gets spent that is going to be proposed, what does that do with the tax rate and the actual dollars? Because I know the assessment's gone up, so the rate has gone down.
That's correct. The residential assessments, and we look at the data from '21, actual calendar year of '21.
Right.
And that's what we factor the assessments at for the upcoming tax rate.
Right.
The residential assessments increased 15% at a minimum, up to 18%, but we're using 15% as our basis. Commercial and industrial assessments increased 10%. With that factored in and our revenue factored in, the local receipts factored in, we're looking at an estimated tax rate of $7.45 per thousand, which is a decrease from this current fiscal year's tax rate of $8.11. But that is largely because of the increase in the assessments.
In the assessment,
Yes.
exactly. So actual dollars in, I shouldn't say in people's wallets, out of people's wallets. If everything passes at town meeting, do you have any projection of what that's going to cost the taxpayers?
So I have not projected that yet. I mean, we can certainly have that available and ready at town meeting.
Okay, all right. What about the Finance Committee? Have you considered that, and do you have any comments, John?
I have considered a little bit. In fact, I sent Carol a question last week on that. I was actually surprised, pleasantly surprised that the tax rate was going down,
Right,
but didn't figure out how that affects, like you say, money's coming out of people's wallets at the end. And like Carol said, she'll have it at town meeting. So that's about all I have there on that,
Okay.
on the tax rate and stuff. But to follow up on some questions, the first question, some of the budget drivers this year was 4 new heads were going to be added to the budget. So that's going to increase the budget that way in 4 different departments.
and will you tell us what they are?
The 4 heads, one is two brand new heads. Well, I guess they're all brand new heads, but one is the cultural affairs director for the new cultural center proposed for that. One is for a housing advocate, a full-time position versus a part-time position that's usually funded part-time. And then a full-time position in the Council on Aging, and then another full-time conversion of a part-time position in the Board of Health to a full-time position. And so you got 4 salaries now affecting that, and then you got benefits and that affect that rate also. So that was a big dollar amount. I was just looking at big dollar amounts of increases
Right.
to the 3 million that Joe mentioned.
When these new positions were proposed, some of them were in the form of warrant articles, which we used to do before if they were brand new positions. And I see that they're no longer warrant articles, they are in the budget. So can you explain why you did that and how that's going to shake out?
Sure. So positions that were warrant articles in years past. In my research, I've found that the town hasn't done that successfully and hasn't done that in more than 15 years, meaning it appears that with Jim Merriam, my predecessor, 2 predecessors ago, if I'm saying that right, and I think it timed in with the charter that was adopted in 2006, that if there was a warrant article, it related to how the position was going to be funded. So there was a predominance of that over the previous 20 years. I want to say there's probably a dozen or so examples, but in every instance, it was a question of how to fund the position.
Right.
The Board of Selectmen made it clear from Jump Street that they wanted these incorporated into the operating budget and part of the raise and appropriate, part of the taxes, because they didn't want to go the extraordinary effort of tying it either to an override or something extraordinary like that, and rather, as has been done with regularity since 2006, put it into the operating budget. So the fact that we're going this route actually mirrors what the town has done for over a decade and a half. I think there's going to be discussion about that process going forward, but it does still meet with the requirements of the charter. And that is that any new full-time position that is to be funded has to be supported and presented by the Board of Selectmen, and they're doing that within the operating budget.
So the Board of Selectmen are presenting this, but it's part of a larger package as opposed to a separate line item that the voters can discuss.
Right, it's enmeshed within Article 4, which is the operating budget.
Right.
As the charter requires, the board presents the operating budget. They'll do that again this year, as they always do, and it's part and parcel of their recommendation for the Article 4 adoption.
And is that something that the Finance Committee agrees with, or?
I think it's fine. We've, the Selectmen and the Finance Committee, we both discussed it
Okay.
in numerous meetings. So it's out in the open. It's transparent as it could be. We have discussed it. I would have been more in favor of putting it in the warrant as a warrant article, but which it was for 2 of the positions in 3 drafts of the warrants. But I fully understand the Selectmen's reasoning, Joe's reasoning, and I'm fine with that. If the townspeople watch the Selectmen's meetings, the finance meetings, they'd be aware of that. It is kind of hard to find it in the budget, those 4 positions, but it is there. So I'm fine with the way it's being presented. But I think a warrant article would have been better, but I'm fine with this too.
Well, I ask these questions because there is a lot of talk now, especially with the cultural center, the new position there. And it's going to be more difficult for people on town meeting floor to figure out when to ask the question. Why are we voting on this?
Sure.
I think there needs to be a discussion, but if they don't know where it is, it's just gonna slide through and people won't understand what
Sure, I
happened.
can speak to that if you'd like, Pam.
Okay,
So Chairman Michael McCaskill is going to be presenting a report of the Board of Selectmen. I believe the moderator is going to recognize him right before Article 4. And as part of his remarks, he's going to talk about what's in the operating budget. He's certainly going to identify those line items in Appendix B in the warrant, where you'll find each of those positions, as well as the wage adjustments that I talked about earlier. And I plan on having additional commentary. So it's not something that either the Board of Selectmen or I are looking to whitewash, if you will. It's going to be part and parcel of our discussions because we want to be transparent, but we also understand that, these are critical roles as I and the board see it. And there's a value statement that goes with those, so we're not going to miss the opportunity to initiate the discussion at town meeting. We'll be upfront about that because they're important.
good, okay, that's what we need. Anybody else have any comments or questions on that?
Can I just make a quick comment? And I apologize, I misunderstood your earlier question. If I could just take this opportunity about the bargaining question. It's always the school committee's goal, whenever we present the budget and whenever it's final and voted on by the finance committee,
Yep.
that all of our bargaining is complete. It's very rare that it's not complete. I mean, we did have a year in 2019 where we were still in negotiations with our teachers. But I just want to just maybe share for the viewers, because we are not a town department, and we kind of have our own, regional school district. Our goal is always to get all that bargaining done. So I just wanted to clarify that,
Right.
because very rarely will we ever enter into a budget with these loose ends, if you will.
Well, sometimes it's unavoidable.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. But
I was there when
yeah,
it was unavoidable.
Yeah, sometimes it is. But during my time, it happened right in the very beginning when I joined, where we still had some loose ends. But I just wanted to clarify that because it's always our goal to come
Right.
in with the best numbers
Well,
that
goals,
we have.
goals
Yeah.
are good. We
Yeah.
all need goals. So.
Yes.
All right, so 4 new potential department head positions.
Well, no, if I could actually, respectfully, I disagree a little bit with how the chairman of finance has identified that. There are 2 positions currently in fiscal year '22 that in response to, in one of the cases, in response to COVID, we've added an inspector in the health department. And so we were able to do that within fiscal year '22. It is not a new position for fiscal year '23, and it was adopted in public discussion and transparency by the board. There are only 2 department head positions that are being advocated in this budget, and they are Director of Cultural Affairs. This will be my first of many times saying, at 204 Sisson Road, known as the former middle school, and the Housing Advocate to support all of our efforts on affordable housing. So those are the 2 new positions. Those 2 positions are at the department head level. The other position relates to the Council on Aging, and that is not a department head level. It's, for lack of a better word, it's a clerical administrative position.
Okay.
So there are 2 positions that were incorporated into fiscal year '22, 2 that are coming in '23, and only 2 that are at the department level.
Okay. All right. And the 2 new positions, they're being funded in the regular budget, but where is the money actually coming from? Is there a new money source that allowed you to add the cultural center position?
So what I'm gonna have to do in a moment is punt to the finance director, because under Article 4, there is a series of sources, but generally, with the operating budget and the intent of the board and me as administrator is those 2 director positions, department head positions, would be under raise and appropriate, so through the levying of taxes.
The levy.
But there's more that goes into that with Article 4 that I'd rather defer to Carol on if I could.
Okay, you're up, Carol, if you will, please.
Sure.
Tried to give you a lead time.
The town of Harwich, just as the same as other municipalities in the Commonwealth, raises local revenue. Local revenue can be raised from many different factors, whether it's motor vehicle excise taxes. It's also receipts for Harwich, which may not be likened to other municipalities, as that Harwich has a strong revenue stream for Cranberry Valley Golf Course, as well as the Harbor Master. In addition to that, the transfer station has significant receipts with regard to municipal solid waste, with regard to construction debris. And so those factors reduce the reliance on property taxes to be raised, which affords the town the ability to see a significant increase in appropriations, which this year, if approved, the budget includes a 5.4% increase in appropriations. Other revenue sources that fund the operating budget is state aid. And that comes in many different forms, whether it's to support veterans or to support, the elderly or things of that nature. So the operating budget is funded from both funds for real estate and personal property taxes, for local revenues, for state revenues, and then other revenues such as, which is minuscule right now, investment revenue, and it's not always minuscule, but for our current state, as we all know.
Investment. Yep.
I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Anybody want to follow up?
No.
Okay. Moving on. We've done the positions. What programs and/or equipment were added using the COVID relief funds?
I don't know that we had programs that are added. I think we were looking on ARPA in the very short term for some of the department vehicles that we normally did under free cash. I think the major ARPA purchase that we're looking to make, I can't even call it an upgrade. I think it's and I will defer to Carol because she's been one of the best champions of this, but we're trying to get into the 21st century technologically. And to do that, the town's looking to acquire a suite of software applications known as Microsoft 365, or Microsoft Office 365. I think in the shorthand they call it as O365. And what that does is it impacts upon how we can operate department to department and then globally as an enterprise effort, meaning the entire municipal corporation, on how teams can interact using email and messaging and a whole suite of applications that we presently don't have. And so we're allowed to rely upon ARPA funds because it's a technology infrastructure investment and it's long overdue. So that's really the biggest thing we have coming up with the first tranche of dollars that we've seen for the town of Harwich's allocation both last year and what's coming in June. We'll have further discussions on what we may be able to rely upon through other tranches from the county and other programs.
How much did we get from this? Is it the state or the federal government with the COVID funds?
The federal government issued the COVID funds. The town of Harwich, for their local share, will receive just under $1.3 million.
Okay.
We received half of that last June, and we'll receive the second half in this June.
Okay. Now, is that separate from COVID funds that went to the regional school system?
It is separate.
It is
from
separate,
COVID
okay.
funds.
All right. So the school has their own COVID
We do,
funds
yep.
that they use for remediation and,
We do. If you want me to just speak a little bit,
yeah, just briefly. Yeah.
Just very briefly. I mean, we have applied certainly to programs, but the biggest thing for us is really mental health for our kids. So when the state money, when the money came in, that was our number one priority because we were seeing a lot of challenges, an increase actually, in mental health we support. So we
Right.
really had to kind of up that game, and so that's predominantly where a lot of our funding went toward.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Carol, do you have any comments?
So, the town of Harwich was very fortunate during the onset of COVID to receive funding from the state and funding from the federal government in other forms other than the funds that we're discussing right now, which is the American Rescue Plan Act. Those are the funds that we're talking about currently. But we had coronavirus funds from the state, and which helped to support, great support for all of the departments in Harwich, whether it's PPE, whether, no matter what, it was assistance for the Council on Aging and their feeding program, which was essential to our elderly folks that were, homebound. In other areas to support our health department and our first responders as well. So the town of Harwich has been very fortunate over the past 2 years to receive that type of funding and support.
Okay, all right. John, do you have any comments?
Nothing on the,
Nothing on that one?
just a quick question on the ESSER funds. I see your sheet there,
Yep.
Tina. Is that ongoing, or is that, what's its lifespan?
It's over a 3-year period.
Okay.
So we have, FY '23, '24, '25. And then so we had to look at this, so it comes in those 3 increments. And then we had to determine, the school committee and the finance committee that we had, and then the school committee had to determine what are our biggest needs in FY '23, '24, '25. And I mean, I have a whole list. I won't read everything out, but a lot of it did go to adding like adjustment counselors, mental health supervision, social workers. So we had to kind of look at where the voids were within our schools, and I don't want to keep poking at mental health, but we really do have some challenges. So, but it is over a 3-year span, and I've got more information if you.
the second year of the 3 years?
Actually, this is the
First year.
first, coming in
Okay.
to FY '23 would be the first.
Okay.
So it's 23, 24, and 25, so that, you'll see that kind of roll, and then it's gone after that.
No, I
And
agree.
nursing too. We had to increase our nursing staff, because we had to test our kids,
Right.
like every single day, and the teachers, so the nursing also, we had to bring on extra nursing support.
No, I agree. Mental health with the children, I've heard, is tremendous. But with all grant programs, they do have a finite ending to them.
Yes, they do.
Yep, they do. Yep.
And sometimes that's a problem because
Right.
you're increasing staff,
Exactly.
but you've only got the funds for 3 years, so you have to keep in mind that
Yep.
in the future,
Yep.
this is part of the regular
Right.
budget now.
And we're very well aware of that,
Yeah.
very well aware. And I'll just take a moment to say that what we were noticing during the pandemic is our guidance counselors were kind of stepping into the mental health support, and that's really not their role, but they were having to step into that. So it was such a clear need that that's where the ESSER funding is going, and we will monitor that very closely.
Yeah.
I mean, there has been arguments, at least within our school committee, made toward hiring adjustment counselors. Because even beyond the mental health from the pandemic, we also have transition challenges. Some of our kids have challenges when they transition from the middle school to the high school, or anything. They may have a family situation, and there's a transition happening.
Well, even
Yeah.
from learning at home.
Exactly, yep.
And then going back into the regular school
Yeah.
system, and that's gonna be difficult for a lot of families.
Yeah,
Oh.
but we are aware of it, and we are staying on top of, where
Yeah.
those needs are, and are they going to settle a bit or not? So that'll be conversations the school committee will have.
Yeah.
Thank
Good.
you.
Okay, thank you. So, where are we here? Oh, OPEB and the Stabilization Fund. Are we continuing to add enough to each of those funds?
So I believe we have $250,000 going into OPEB, which is already factored into the operating budget.
Excuse me, can I, would you just, for the people out there who don't know what OPEB is, would you describe it?
So I
for
can
them?
describe the acronym, and then I'm gonna look to my right for additional help.
Carol's chomping at the bit. She
So,
has the
yeah,
answer.
then I'll just go right to Carol if I could.
Okay,
So OPEB, what does OPEB mean?
yes.
It's other post-employment benefits other than pension. So these are the health insurance benefits that retirees receive once they leave employment and qualify for retirement through the town of Harwich.
Mhm.
And it also, it also will include when Harwich had a school department. So we still have teachers and other support staff that worked at the school department when it was part of the town of Harwich that we're supporting, and we continue to support.
So that's a liability that we
Correct.
have to cover. And is our fund healthy enough?
So the town just received, and when I say just received, December, received an actuarial valuation on what happens when data is provided to an actuary and they calculate morbidity. And so when that's calculated, it comes up with a true and complete number of, it was just right around $40 million that is the liability. Right now, there's just about $4 million in the OPEB trust fund. The operating budget does include a $250,000 support for OPEB. In addition, the water enterprise fund budgets on an annual basis $50,000 to support OPEB as well. This year, there is no separate and distinct article for funding other than what's in the operating budget in the enterprise fund.
Oh, all right. And does that include the schools, or is that separate?
It's separate.
Okay.
Yeah, it's separate. So for us, we put for FY '23 in our OPEB contribution in our own budget, we put $100,000 into the FY '23. We do have a current OPEB liability around $70 million, and we've currently funded about 1.4% of that. So that's to kind of share with that.
All right,
for-
but it's
within
something
hours,
to
yeah.
keep in mind, because it is part of the town's responsibility.
Exactly,
So it
yep.
impacts future.
And and I think everybody knows, I mean, we've got the largest group, that we have to really kind of monitor
Right.
over there, so, yeah.
Yeah,
So, and I think it's important to note that this is the liability for Monomoy
Exactly.
is separate from any other liability that the
Right.
town, not that the town isn't responsible for
Right.
a large portion
Right.
of
Exactly,
the
exactly.
Monomoy's
Right.
liability, but it is separate and distinct from the town's own OPEB liability.
correct.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yep.
John, any comments on the?
No, and our stabilization fund, I spoke with Carol last week about it, it's healthy, I guess, at roughly $5.5 million. Even though no contributions are being made this year, it's still a healthy stabilization number.
Would one of you describe what exactly a stabilization fund is?
I'll defer to Carol also.
What are we going to do without you, Carol?
If we think about it as, we have rainy day funds, right?
Right.
You may have a savings account, your own personal savings account with some funds in it that, perhaps, yourself and a spouse or a family member may, make the decision together whether they're gonna use some of those funds in case of needs. Same is true here. This is kind of a rainy day fund, but it takes a vote of town meeting in order, and the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, all have to be in agreement to use those funds for special purposes. You may recall for when COVID first hit all of us, the Board of Selectmen and town meeting vote chose to use $574,000 of stabilization funds to balance the budget. Since then, those funds have been replenished, and another $500,000 has also been provided to that fund. We are at the end of December, we were at $5.5 million in stabilization, and actually, the OPEB trust, I misspoke, it's just under $5 million now.
Okay. Well, thank you.
If I can just add on to that, even though we don't have a separate funding source this year for OPEB, what you just heard Carol talk about is the town's remaining commitment to our stabilization funds for those rainy day purposes. And I think it was a great story, if you will, where yes, we had to rely upon stabilization in the earliest throes of the pandemic, where we were operating on the 1/12 budget until we could get to a town meeting when it was safe outside. And then the town taking the action of replenishing that, I think demonstrates that even though our budgets are dynamic and they grow year over year, we try to be mindful of how we do that. And we also try to be mindful of where we are at stabilization. Because the town enjoys a great bond rating, a AAA rating. And Carol and I are scheduled to do a bond rating call right after town meeting. And so we're going to be able to articulate that even with growth in some of our budget areas, the town is doing well and the town remains fiscally responsible. And we can rely upon some of those facts and figures to support that. And I'm hopeful and cautiously optimistic that the bond markets and the rating calls will see that and will continue our excellent rating.
Good. Okay.
Pam, do you mind, and I'm hoping this is an appropriate spot, because this is a question that comes up every year during the budget conversations. So when we talk about stabilization and your rainy day funds, I want to just take this opportunity to say for Monomoy, because again, we're not a town department, so we have to kind of do our own thing. So our excess and deficiency, which always comes up every budget cycle,
Right.
that kind of is our rainy day fund. So I just want to take this opportunity to speak to that, because like stabilization, every year when we're doing our budgets, our goal is to always try to put at least $50,000 in our stabilization. In our FY23 budget, it is in there, but a lot of times we're taking it out. We put zero because we're trying our best to contribute and to lower the assessment. So there are many years we have nothing in our stabilization. So we rely on our E&D, our excess and deficiency, for any emergencies. So it's a difficult conversation every budget cycle, because we make every effort to put as much as we can from E&D, but it
Right.
does come up every year, you know that, John. And we are protective at the school committee. We have to maintain some monies in there, because if an emergency came up, that is our rainy day account. So I just wanted to take that moment to clarify E&D, because that's the number one thing I hear every year. Can't you just wipe out your E&D? No, we cannot, because if an
Right.
emergency happened, we're up doo-doo creek, you know, so.
Well, that's why I'm asking these questions, because I think it's important. It's been a hard year for a lot of people. And then we're going to give them good news, because revenues are up, the assessments are also up, but the bottom line is we can afford to do what we are doing this year. And there are an awful lot of pieces to the puzzle, so I really encourage people to ask more questions, to come to town meeting. Another thing that's not on my list right now, but maybe we can touch on it briefly, is the regional agreement. I know you had a separate program on that, but just in a few words, describe what will happen if Chatham and Harwich agree to amend the regional agreement. How is that going to affect our budget?
Yes. So if everything goes as planned, fingers crossed,
Right.
and the agreement amendments are passed at both town meetings, what that means for Harwich is the budget that we have presented, that everybody sees, that bottom line number is going to decrease by 0.22%, which is number value. It's 739,747. So what that means is that amount, if these regional agreements pass, that number comes from the bottom, from Chatham to Harwich.
Right.
So, and I think Joe did a great job a couple of meetings ago at the Board of Selectmen describing how that worked, because I think there's a process that when you get that money back, I guess the surplus is what you would call it. So if it passes, you're looking at $739,747. That automatically comes back to Harwich, and then Harwich has to go through a process of seeing how to apply that. So that's how it will help.
So it doesn't go back to the school portion of
No.
Harwich, it goes back to the general fund, is that correct?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on how the Board of Selectmen chose to handle it. They could hold a special town meeting in the fall, and reduce the amount that's being raised and appropriated from real estate and personal property taxes. Do you want to
I absolutely do,
complete that
yeah.
comment?
So the reason why I jump like that is I didn't want to misspeak. First and foremost, Carol and I, on everything we talked about this morning, and certainly as it relates to the regional agreement, we've been discussing these matters literally for years, and certainly throughout the entire year. And so Carol's provided great guidance to me, and in our conversations, I opted to go with the assumption that the assessment's gonna go forward as it presently is. Because I'd rather that and rather operate on a mindset that everything as is as we understand it. But we're very hopeful that it will pass, and we'll have passed in both towns. And so then we examine after the start of the fiscal year, what do we want to do next? And so we are contemplating a special town meeting in the fall so that we could handle this excess, for lack of a better word, before we set our tax rate for the tax bills going forward. But I think it's worth bearing that we still took a measured and what I would consider to be an appropriately conservative approach to this process. Having said that, and I will defer to John, but I know that the Board of Selectmen have unanimously endorsed the changes to the regional agreement. It is absolutely in Harwich's best interest for us to vote for the assessment at our annual town election on May 17th, and preceding that at town meeting. Sorry, I think I just messed that up completely. That our town meeting, and then 2 weeks later for Chatham. And we're very hopeful that the Chatham voters will see the benefit, because for me, what's really being asked here is a midlife check, if I could say it that way, of this regional arrangement that predates me by over a decade. this is a chance for both towns to validate what we have in our regional system and to just recognize the benefits for both communities and to tweak it so that we can continue on for another 20-plus years unabated. And so, there's benefit for Harwich in the short term. Certainly, I think there's benefit for both communities and certainly our district going forward. And should they prevail, we'll take it up at our special in the fall.
Okay.
Do you want me to just speak a minute? Oh, did you?
No, I was just going to say, that we did take a vote too, as on the Finance Committee, and did support the article that Dr. Carpenter is going to write and put into the Chronicle.
Yes.
Along
yes.
with the Chatham Finance Committee also.
Exactly. And what John's referring to, just for the public, is the school committee and the Chatham Select Board and the Harwich Board of Selectmen all agree that this is the right way to go. And so what we decided on the school committee is it would be a good idea to have a joint letter of support and to have the two finance committees, the two select boards, and the school committee to just say this is the right thing to do. So there is a letter coming in front of the Harwich Board of Selectmen and the Select Board in Chatham to agree on this letter that the superintendent and the chair and myself kind of put together to just make sure we're all in agreement with what it says. And if I could just take this opportunity from the Chatham perspective, that the regional agreement changes really make a lot of sense for them too, and I'm hoping they'll see that at town meeting, because what happens is we have to, because we're a regional school district, we want to give our Chatham students just the high quality education that the Harwich kids are getting.
Right.
And in order to do that, this really does have to happen. If it doesn't happen and the regional agreement doesn't pass, we have to look at taking staff away over at Chatham, and that will creep into the program and the quality we can offer. Mm-hmm. So in order to maintain our small class sizes and all the supports we need over at Chatham, this really does have to happen, and that's the argument that my colleagues, my school committee colleagues, will be making over on the town meeting floor in Chatham.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Any other comments?
Well, if I could just clarify the record, I want to make clear that if I'm not wearing a tie, it means I'm on vacation, and I have to
You're
correct the record
excused.
that I just botched a moment ago. I'm in vacation mode. So to be clear, Town of Harwich at our town meeting will take up the regional agreement. It's a town meeting question. It's not going to impact on the town elections. But right before our town election is when Chatham meets. So we'll know middle of May where we stand for both towns as a community. So don't look for anything in the Harwich ballot.
Yes.
I lapsed into vacation mode, and I will pay for that when I return to work officially.
Okay.
Thank you for the chance to clarify.
All right. Well, I think we've done a good job of covering the highlights. Is there anything that any of you want to add as far as the health of the town? And
I'd add a couple things.
Yes,
We
okay.
talked predominantly about the Monomoy Schools district also, but the technical high school too, their budget was up considerable this year. And that was due to a total increase of 20 new students going to the school.
Yep.
So that's what that number represents. And it was a fairly good number. It was $543,000 was up, but that equates to 20 students going, taking advantage, I imagine, of a brand new school system there.
Well, and also the tech cost per pupil is higher because of the equipment that's needed and the specialized training that is needed, and it's.
Yeah,
I mean, for us, it's a jewel because we've got
Oh,
it
yeah.
right next door to
Yeah.
us. So
Because in the finance committee, we look for big spikes in numbers, and
Right.
that was up 35%
Yep.
spike in numbers there.
yeah.
Just the other thing I want to make folks aware of in the town is that, we talk about an operating budget, the school budget, but there are other factors within a warrant too that the town citizens are asked to vote on in total. There was an article in the Chronicle last week saying that the financial total budget of the town was about $78,798,000. Well, that's close to the number, but the actual number, from the way I look at it, is all the other budgets that are incorporated within the town warrant. You got the town operating budget, you got the Monomoy school budget, the tech school budget, You have a water department budget in there now, and a wastewater. Now, granted, those are by and large paid out of retained earnings, but it's still something the town has to vote on. That's budget numbers. There's a capital plan in there that's a considerable amount this year. And we probably don't have enough time to get into the 5-year plan, but going out 5 years, it's really considerable plan. And then the last one is CPC articles. And the folks in the audience know that CPC is Community Preservation Committee. That's a 3% surcharge on your property taxes that goes into this committee's responsibility to disperse amongst 4 different buckets, or even 5 buckets, depending on who you talk to. You know, for historical preservation, real estate purchases, recreation, and housing. And that's considerably. I mean, they're going to spend $2.9 million on CPC articles. Again, that's taxpayer money in the sense that it's 3% on taxpayers' money.
Right.
So when you add up all those budgets, you come to $85 million. That's a big budget.
It is for a small town. It
And,
is.
and it's all money that the town will be voting on at town meeting. It's all spelled out in the warrant. And that's, other than that, it was a great, a great process working with Carol and Joe and the selectmen over the course of, of the time that we had to meet and go through a lot of numbers. We didn't have facts and figures up until the last minute on some things, which is the way it goes sometimes, but we got it through. We voted on every single article except 2 because we didn't have sufficient numbers to vote on that, but when we did have sufficient numbers, we voted in the positive for both of those articles there.
So all votes are taken.
All votes were
That's
taken,
good.
but we
Okay.
delivered what they call no recommendations pending
Right.
further information on
Right.
2 articles.
Yep.
One was the capital plan, because we voted on one capital plan, but then when we got a new number, it was about $170,000 more, and we didn't have enough time. Now, we did vote on it, but not enough time to get it to Joe in time to meet the town
The
March
printing.
March 31st deadline.
Yep.
And then the other article was just a grammatical thing that we didn't understand in the CPC article funding, which we did vote positively on too. So, and that will be reflected when I read the motions on on the town
The
meeting.
town meeting.
That it will be a positive motion that we all voted for. So, other than that, it's a lot of money for a small town. But like the Carol alluded to, we have great programs here. We have golf marinas, we have golf courses, we have a transfer station. I think is the best on the Cape, and there's some articles in there that I think are important articles too. But we don't have the time to get into the warrant articles.
Okay. Well, Chris did a pretty good show in the last couple of days on the warrant articles. So if you're out there in TV land, you can go to the website and you can view the YouTube. And then they're also on a Channel 18 loop, so all of our panel discussions are there for everyone to see. Before we wrap things up, I want to give Carol Capola a very special thank you for your service. We're all heartbroken that you're leaving.
Yes, we are.
It's just so refreshing to have a finance director who just has the answers, right there.
Thank you.
I
So
clapped, Carol, but it's
I-
not a clap to leave. It's a clap that I'm sorry you're leaving.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
you have. She's been a
Yeah.
tremendous help to the finance committee, along with previous towns administrators and Joe this year on numbers. It's a moving target there.
Well, and you're not really leaving, you're still part of the county,
That's correct.
so
Right.
we still get the benefit of
We
your
know exactly where she's
expertise.
going and how to reach her.
Yeah, but you've been a very important piece,
absolutely.
and
Yes.
you've been wonderful with helping all of us to understand the financial implications of what is being done here. Thank you, every one of you. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to chime in with a question?
Just a reminder of the date and location for town meeting.
Please
I'll pass
attend.
it on to Joe.
So Monday, May 2nd, 12 days from the taping of this program, at 7 p.m. here at the community center. Thrilled to be back in person, back in our normal location. And I've been told by folks that are in this building to expect 2 nights. So I'm just gonna put it out there that we're gonna have so much fun on Monday that we're probably gonna bring it back on Tuesday.
Wow.
And then Pam, if I could very quickly, just want to remind, and again, thank you and the Voter Information Committee for this opportunity. And the last thing I would like to say about the topic today and our financial state is, the town of Harwich, I think, remains very well run and managed. We are in great financial condition. We enjoy strong reaction in the marketplace, if you will. And for me, I just remind everybody that when I develop an operating budget, a budget is meant to be a statement of our priorities. And so on Monday, May 2nd, we'll decide and debate and find out what our priorities are, and we'll move forward from there. But I'm thrilled to be here today because it signals that we're almost done. So thank you again, I
That's good
appreciate it.
Can I ask one
Yes.
quick question? I
Yeah.
forgot to ask Carol. Free cash, what do we have for free cash now, Carol? Do you have a close number there?
So currently, that balance is $3,076,202.
Oh, that's assuming, I mean, but if things are passed at town meeting, that'll drop, right? If everything passes at town meeting, what
If
will we have?
everything passes at town meeting, there'll be just under
Okay,
$325,000
that's the number
remaining.
before. Thank you.
Right. And Pam, I think you had a question for me about school choice. We didn't touch on that. I
Oh,
didn't
you're
know
right.
if you,
Well, I just wondered
Yeah.
where those funds go and how they're being spent.
okay, sure. So we've budgeted for FY '23, 1.4 million, and that's projected for the school choice monies. And it goes predominantly to teacher and instructional assistant salaries, because it is kind of spread over all 4 schools. And I just want to take the opportunity to say that our school choice going out is getting lower and lower and lower, and we're really proud of that. And so we're bringing more school choice money in than what was going out, many years ago. And I think that is just, we've got a wonderful quality program at Monomoy. We're all very, very proud of it. So that is shifting, and I'm very, very happy to see that. We're just not saying goodbye to kids
Good.
like we were at one point, because kids are staying. And pretty much any school choice monies that go out are really more for the students where they're somewhere for a long time. Like maybe they made the choice 5 or 10 years ago, whatever. And so we're still having to pay that until
Okay.
they graduate.
Yeah.
But as far as any new kids, we're just not seeing it. Everybody's staying.
Do you have actual numbers, the number of kids going out?
I don't
and
have the number of
coming in?
kids, but I did look at, it's approximately 94,000 approximately in FY '23, but that number can shift because we don't know until we write it right up, but that's the projected number, and that's what's kind of worked into our budget. And but we kind of have to ride it out up until the school day, because people do change their minds like a
Yes.
week ahead of.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, and it's always our goal, again, going back to our goals, we know what families, and we're always having conversations with families to just check in. How's it going? How's it going? Can we bring you back? So we're always having those conversations, and those things can change
Yes.
1 or 2 weeks right before school. So,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. We are done. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
I think this was a good discussion. And if anybody has questions or concerns, come to town meeting. You can ask all the questions you want. Go up to the mic or send someone else to the mic. But please try to attend.
Yeah.
Town meeting is the purest form of government, and I think we need to treat it gently and appreciate the fact that we have the ability to be there and our voices to be heard. So again, from the Voter Information Committee, thank you to all of you, and we'll see you on May 2nd.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.